Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Pinniped Community Meeting. These meetings are held every first and third Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if you are watching this from home on a recorded meeting, we would love to have you join live. When you are attending these meetings, we ask that you please read and abide by our code of conduct, which is listed here in the agenda. If you're unable to attend these meetings in person and would like to get in contact with the team, you can find us on Slack and Twitter, as well as in GitHub, of course. These details right here outline how to get a hold of us in the Kubernetes Slack workspace within the Pinniped channel, as well as on Twitter at Project Pinniped. If you have anything that you wish to discuss in this meeting today, please put that down in the discussion topics section at the agenda, and we'll get to it after the other items. Also, when you attend these meetings, we ask that you put in your name in the organization or company you represent. This is just a way for us to keep track of those that are attending our meetings, and we can keep those lines of communication open. As far as announcements goes, just a reminder to please register to attend the Pinniped CNCF webinar, which is happening on August 24th, 2021 at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And if you click on that link, it'll take you here, and you might have to create a login to RSVP. And the maintainers, Matt Moyer and Marker Crawford, are going to be the speakers for this webinar. And as I am speaking, someone is putting in one of the announcements. I'm going to assume it's Matt.
Yeah, yeah, we're releasing or planning to release O.10 today. So that will have sort of two new features. One is support for logging in from machines without web browsers, so like SSH jump hosts, sort of the main use case. And then it will also have some new support for doing the LDAP login flow in a non-interactive context, like from a CI/CD job, by setting environment variables. And then also has a few smaller features and bug fixes. It has support for outbound proxies in the supervisor OIDC identity provider. It has support for, and then it has a bug fix for correctly merging annotations on the impersonation proxy service, which is a bug that can cause performance issues. Anyway, that will be out later today. We have a blog post planned that'll go with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. That's exciting. All right, next up, status updates on the project roadmap. So
yeah, I can dive into this too. Anjali and I adjusted some things here this morning to reflect reality. We did make one priority swap as well. So remote OIDC login support happening today. So that is going to release in July, which is good because it's July 29th. AD support is waiting to be merged, basically. We have a couple of last potential features that we're still trying to iron out details about global catalog support and how that should work exactly. But Marco, I think basically your branch has been stable for a while now.
Yeah, the main feature set is pretty much done. There's like a couple people we've reached out to for kind of validating some of it. So people who know more about AD than we as a team. So sort of pending that global catalog support.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So the other context here is a lot of the VMware team is taking PTO in August. So it's going to be kind of a light month. But we're hoping to do another release towards the end of August that'll have AD support. And then the next roadmap item is this multiple IDP support, which really means on the supervisor having a federation domain with multiple identity providers configured and giving users multiple ways to log in. That Ryan has a design doc for that. We're going to go through later in the meeting. And then as well, a roadmap item for wider concierge cluster support. I think this is a little bit vague. I think the main one that we're going to add is OpenShift support. It's a little open-ended about whether there's anything else that's sort of easy to pick off. But I think Mo, you had a proof of concept a while back about how to make the concierge work easily on OpenShift, and I think this will be essentially productizing that proof of concept.
Yeah, there was the open question about the CSR kept that we discussed last meeting, if we would go that approach, or if we would do both things to get sort of lots of coverage.
I think we might want to do both things. That's a good point. I forgot. Yeah, Kubernetes is releasing here in mid-August, so this should be a good time. We could add support right around, because we'll be able to start using the 122 client libraries with all the right API types and start building that in September for sure, in August. The things that we swapped, so we did swap that multiple IDP support one higher than the concierge cluster type support. That's we sort of saw multiple IDP support as kind of a table stakes thing that people probably would assume already works. If you were just sitting down for the first time with Pinniped, you would, looking at our APIs, you would guess that this already works somehow, and it doesn't. So that feels like the bigger priority to sort out. Yeah, and the rest of the roadmap is unchanged. I did want to call out, I don't know if you all talked, I think I missed the last community call, but on the identity transforms roadmap item, there is a experimental PR open that Ryan made that is a exploration of that using Starlark as like a policy language. It's super cool, and you go check it out.
Do you have a link to that, Matt?
Yeah, let me grab it.
And we can put it in the, if you want to just put it in the agenda. All right. I put something in here from the previous meeting just to see if there's any updates to it. Considering using the functionality provided by CSR duration Capman 1.22 to broaden support of clusters without the need of the impersonation proxy. Does anybody want to talk about that? Was there any movement there?
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
From the previous meeting, this right here.
Essentially, that's the same thing we were just talking about. But I guess the update upstream is that all the things we needed to be merged are merged, right?
Yep, everything's merged. Docs are merged. Somebody will probably nag me for a release note at some point soon, but all the functionality is merged as beta in 122. It's enabled by default, so we can use it in 122. But yeah, so it would allow in at least some environments an approach that no longer requires the impersonation proxy. So whenever we get around to adopting that, we'd sort of make it easier for adoption of the concierge, because the impersonation proxy does require networking configuration that may not be, we can't necessarily automatically do it. We do sort of automatically do it in some situations, mostly when you like kubectl apply stuff, but not in like the production deployment style. So.
Cool. Thanks, Mo. Okay, moving on to discussion topics. The multiple IDP support design doc. Who wants to discuss this?
So I can take a shot at this. Maybe I can share my screen so I can point with the mouse.
Yep.
All right, can you all see that? Okay, so this is hot off the press. I just finished this yesterday evening, so my teammates have not had a chance to read it yet. So it might make sense for this to be more like just a brief introduction, brief overview of the document. The document is meant to just create discussion. It's not meant to be like a super concrete proposal saying this is definitely what we should do. It's just more of a straw dog proposal to create discussion so we can all start brainstorming on the details and put together a more concrete design together. So maybe just kind of introduce it, and then we can kind of defer the critiques, the brainstorms until everyone has had a chance to read it. We can do that together at a later date. Does that sound okay? So start at the top. What are we talking about here? I think if we back up, we created this API in the supervisor called a federation domain. And when we dreamed that up, what we intended it to be is to represent a pool of users to provide identity to a pool of Kubernetes clusters. And we implemented that second part where you can create federation domains and create as many as you want in the supervisor. And each one provides identity to a pool of clusters. Any cluster can sign up to trust that federation domain and to get identities from it, to allow it to perform the authentication for that cluster. But what we didn't really do was that first part. We didn't really create a way for federation domains to distinguish users. So all the federation domains today, they all use the same underlying identity provider, and we only let you define one of them. And so basically all federation domains are equal because you can't distinguish pools of users and put policies on federation domains. So that's really what multiple identity providers is all about. It's letting you define lots of different identity providers and then decide which federation domains are going to use which identity providers, and specifically how are they going to use them. So it started out this doc with just kind of brainstorming a couple of different use cases where you might want to do something like this. So for example, I'm not going to read this whole doc to you, but I would encourage everyone to read it after the fact. The link is already shared, I think, on the agenda doc. But just for example, one possible use case might be maybe you're in charge of creating pools of clusters for development teams, and you would like each development team to have its own pool of Kubernetes clusters. And you want to make sure that only people who belong to that development team can log into those Kubernetes clusters. But you would like all those identities to come from your corporate identity provider. And so theoretically, you could create a federation domain per team, and then you could tailor each federation domain so that each pool of clusters that belongs to a team could only be accessed by those team members. And several other examples follow. I encourage you to look at those. Then the doc goes into an overview of, just to remind us and to remind myself, how does it work today? What are the limitations that we have today? Why do we have them? It goes in, there's a bit of a summary, goes into more details. It has links to the source code. The basic idea is today we only let you define one identity provider. No good reason, just because we didn't have time to do this design work of how multiple identity providers should work when we released the supervisor initially. So today you can define one. All federation domains use it equally, which unfortunately makes all federation domains kind of interchangeable and equivalent to each other. That's what we would like to. Also thought about, we already have clusters out there. And so when you upgrade your supervisor to some new version that supports multiple identity providers, what are some things we should keep in mind? How are we going to try to make that a smooth upgrade? So what's out there today is kind of summarized here in these sections. And then lots of questions that I'd love to have everyone chime in and share their thoughts on the doc or in a separate follow-up meeting. So I just started asking questions and just dumping thoughts into the doc about each question. These, again, I'm not going to read all these to you, but please take a look at them. There's a lot of thoughts in there. Please add your thoughts. More importantly, please, what questions did I forget to ask? So please add more questions as well as you think of them. What are the things that we would have to explore and answer before we actually come up with a really concrete design for this? And then finally, I sketched a straw dog proposal. If you're not familiar with the term straw dog, it's the brainstorming seed. So it's not meant to be the final answer. It's meant to start a conversation. And in this straw dog proposal, what I've suggested as a starting point for discussion is basically summarized with this conceptual difference between identity providers and federation domains, which is that an identity provider like an OIDC or LDAP, or very soon, thanks to Margot, an Active Directory identity provider, is the thing that knows how to talk a specific authentication protocol or talk to a specific kind of identity provider, specific kind of server. It knows about the schema of that server. So it knows when I get a user record, how do I pick things out of the schema of that record? And so it can authenticate a user against a very specific type of identity provider server. Whereas a federation domain, I think it might be nice if that took that normalized view of a user that could come from any kind of identity provider, and then allowed you to project that user down into a pool of Kubernetes clusters and potentially customize that user, transform that user, or apply more policy to that authenticated, normalized representation of a user on its way down into those downstream workload clusters, as we sometimes call them. And so the rest of this proposal kind of just follows the logic of that separation of responsibilities and tries to come up with a way that might make that hopefully very flexible and somewhat easy to use for folks. Maybe I'll just leave it there because there's a lot to read. There's a lot of details, but that's maybe enough to give everyone an overview. They can go look at the doc and we can kind of start a conversation based on that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that was a good overview. I'll resist the urge to dive into design questions, but I think in terms of scheduling, I think we'll be ready to pick up this work somewhere toward end of September. So maybe we should, this work, I'm crossing the streams here. This work ties in a lot with, I think, the Starlark identity transforms work as well. So maybe it makes sense to combine those, which I think would mean that the feature lands like in September, October timeframe. This feels like a really good start to start that discussion. This is like to me, this is the biggest feature of Pinniped that we've known about since we started building it, and we haven't designed yet. We kind of knew that we wanted all of these things almost from the beginning. We just knew it was going to be hard, so we put it off until we had the basics, and we're almost ready to build that. So that's really exciting to me. I feel really excited about starting this. Yeah,
I think the
putting it together.
other big feature that we kind of know about but we haven't done is arbitrary IDPs like GitHub and all their friends. Like we know we want to add that. We just they get somewhere in our our backlog and stuff for various things. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting that together, Ron.
Yeah, I look forward to having some team discussions around it as soon as possible after everyone has a chance to read it.
Cool. Did anyone have any further comments on that? And was there anything that something's come up that anybody wishes to discuss before we head out?
I wanted to make a little minor comment. This is really just meant as a thought. When you were talking through the design just a little bit, I don't think we've ever discussed some kind of policy around the token exchange API itself. So maybe that kind of fits into the whole federation domain Starlark functions thing, that today you're allowed to do the token exchange as long as the client has the right scope or like the original request had the right scope on it, but maybe we can make that fancier.
You think about things like restricting which users can pick which cluster audiences. Things like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. Like, and you could imagine that would be a different approach to accomplish the like if you wanted to have one federation domain across many clusters, but only like developers could only use the developer clusters, and I don't know, IT admins could only use the production cluster or something like that. I don't know. Maybe that kind of approach makes sense. Yeah. I think the benefit of multiple federation domains is that it's very distinct and obvious separation. And the negative is also that it's distinct and obvious separation. Like you must now have different like ingresses and property certificates and all that.
Remember, we were careful to make federation domains very lightweight. So you can create an arbitrary number of federation domains all under the same endpoint, the same TLS certificate, because we let you just vary the path of the issuer to make a new federation domain. So if your supervisor is at supervisor.example.com, you can have one federation domain at supervisor.example.com/developers and a different one at supervisor.example.com/IT/production.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. It does. It does. I think the supervisor configuration is not that bad because of that. It does mean then that on the client side, on the workload cluster side and the concierge, it does have to like have a separate JOT authenticator for each federation domain, which is okay. But it might also be nice to have an abstraction that says like, oh, this workload cluster trusts this supervisor. Maybe it actually trusts like a whole bunch of different combinations of these settings from that supervisor. Obviously, I think this document is a really good start. There's probably like a million little rabbit holes like this that we need to go down and figure out some of the trade-offs, but yeah, it's a good start.
Cool. Anything else? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining the Pinniped community meeting today. And just a reminder, if you're watching this from home, please consider joining us live. We meet every first and third Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And we also can be found on Twitter at Project Pinniped and in the Kubernetes Slack workspace in the Pinniped channel. So we encourage you to join us. You're free to come and lurk. You're free to come and bring any discussion topics or anything you need help with regarding the project. We would love to have you. And with that, thank you.